So, if I can advance here, there we go. Our objective, discuss IT documentation, brings technology environments to the next level by improving efficiency, enabling compliance, and strengthening cyber resilience capabilities. Our roadmap for, like, say, about 15 minutes. We're going to talk about why it matters, some best practices, and some of the real-world impact that structured IT documentation can have. If there's any specific topics, we'll have some time to chat. Like, say, we got an hour and it's about a 20-minute presentation, so we'll have plenty of time to chat. We'll talk IT documentation matters. It's the foundation that allows us to respond to any sort of incident and maintain your operations. For those of us with compliance requirements, whether that's HIPAA, whatever, it's going to be a matter of your business opening in the morning. For those of us in the DIB or in the critical infrastructure sectors, it's required and it's a matter of national security. In the event of an incident, whether it's malicious or not, access to your documentation is going to be critical to your recovery, and it's going to allow your team to follow established procedures for everything, and it covers your ask to begin with, and it also adds the value to the stakeholder. So whether your stakeholder is a system owner or whether it's an end user, you're going to get the same result every time. And the reason that's important is because we see a lot of times in bigger businesses that may have 5 or 10 help desk people, or even up to hundreds of help desk people, you'll end up with people contacting you directly saying, or your technicians directly saying, hey, can you help me with this? When they're following an SOP, they're going to get the same result every time. There is no one that's better than anyone else. So that starts at your ticketing system. It's the simplest portion. It's where everything goes. Users report your issues, and you can track who solves issues, how they're solved. But we'll talk about how you can keep track of that in a structured way later. That makes it both searchable and gives you usable analytics to go off of. We can use it to easily identify trends and reports to automate and cut down on tedious tickets. You can use automations based on keywords and tickets to execute scripts. You can go into any variation of creative ways to automate your tedious tickets, regardless of what they are, and what department you're in. If you're on the help desk or if you're in a sysadmin role, it's going to be different automations, but you can do the same things. It only works if your ticketing system is used, though, which means that you need to have policy and procedure in place to ensure that users are actually using a ticketing system, technicians are filling it out correctly, and that tickets are being closed. That can be through SLAs, that can be through corporate policy, or it could be just ignoring people unless they put in a ticket. So some uniform documentation is going to be things either in your ticketing system or in things like SOPs or Word documents. Use your templates. So in Word documents, you're going to follow the same format for everything. You're going to have the same fields, so you'll have your purpose in your SOPs. You'll have your contacts, you'll have your procedures, screenshots, things like that. And one thing that I want to bring up for SOPs specifically is to have a contact, or any sort of knowledge-based article, anything like that, have a point of contact, because if your policy is going to be to follow an SOP for everything, you need to be able to report when there's an issue. If you're reviewing these annually or quarterly or whoever, the person writing the SOP is likely not the person executing the task, meaning you need to have someone there to ask questions to, some sort of subject matter expert on performing that one procedure. We can also look at centralized storage. So a single, easily searchable location for everything. So that's SharePoint. ITGlue is a popular one. It looks like for MSPs, where it's multi-tenanted. You have per company, and then simple network shares. ITFlow is one that I found. It's a self-hosted option. It's open source, and it might be good for if you have a lab of some sort to demonstrate your abilities for technical documentation to a prospective employer, or if you're working on some sort of lab for college or something. It has some structured IT documentation capabilities, as well as a ticketing system that integrates, so that you can integrate your ticketing with your knowledge base, with your organizational procedures, things like that. And then categorize it by type, so that's network share, servers, endpoints, things like that, to make it easily accessible, right? So you'll see on the slideshow we have an SOP number. That's just how we did it in my organization. We use a 4-digit number where each position means a different it means something different, right? So 1 might mean it's internal if your first number is a 1, or 2 might mean it's external facing. You know, if the second number is a 2, that might mean it's endpoint, or if it's a 3, it might mean it's a server-related document, right? So you can make up your own scheme, but just have something that's search-friendly. So if you know it has to do with an endpoint, you should be able to go to an endpoint folder or easily access it somehow, whether that's literally navigating in a folder structure or searching with keywords. Excuse me. Scheduled reviews are going to be another thing that I feel a lot of organizations miss out on. So again, this is going to be heavily dependent on when things change in your environment. If you're a small doctor's office where nothing ever changes in your network, it doesn't matter. You still have to review it annually because it's a HIPAA requirement. But there are some things in big organizations that change every day, right? If you're an ISP, you're probably changing your network infrastructure every day. So maybe quarterly for high-risk areas. If you're changing something every day, you might add a review for documentation at the end of one of your SOPs, right? We're going to update the network diagram when we install a switch, whatever it may be. Now we can jump back a slide. Sorry. Okay. So again, we might add a switch and add an update to documentation at the end of that procedure. When you're pushing out new equipment, it's just part of the everyday task that you do. It's going to be required in the ticket to close the ticket. Whatever you need to set up to make it happen in your environment. Another option, and I believe this is a screenshot from ITGlue, is you'll see setting expiration dates. So you can see one document expired in the screenshot. That allows you to schedule these reviews. If you're bad at getting a board together to look at policy every year, it allows that document to expire, right? So you update it, you set the expiration date for whenever you think it needs to be reviewed. It expires, and it goes away from your technicians until it's reviewed. So having a tool like that could be a benefit to keeping your team on pace. I don't know, does anyone else have any tool recommendations or places to store that? I know we said SharePoint.
Yeah, I was actually just looking at ITFlow, and the place I work for, we're actually looking into IT document storage solutions right now. But one good thing that's really worked well in the past for places I've worked at is just using a simple self-hosted wiki system, because there's many wiki apps you can get out there, and it's really awesome when you're trying to write, mainly for smaller teams, you're trying to write documentation, and it's kind of one of those things where the more hassle it is to write the documentation, like using ITGlue, which I've tried before, and it's not a simple task in ITGlue, but if you have a wiki, it's simple as double click on your parent page, start typing out an article, hit publish, and you're done. So that's a really good solution for smaller organizations.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not real familiar with ITGlue, to be honest with you.
It's
one of the big ones that popped up in my 25 minutes of research on this.
Yeah, it's something where if you have a lot of policies that you need to adhere to, ITGlue is really good for that. It's not necessarily great for, say, a small team that just needs to document things quickly and efficiently. But for what you're describing here, ITGlue is great, and ITFlow looks pretty neat too.
Yeah, I scrolled through their website and while they're setting up an instance.
There was another one.
If we're building a lab in Walsenburg, that might be something to look at.
Yeah.
Is how can you document and have those process flows centrally stored? You can host it yourself, which is a lab experiment on its own.
Yeah, ITFlow looked really cool, especially because you can host it yourself.
Yeah, I think a lot of cool presentations and things will come out of that lab.
Yeah.
So, got it over here. Oops. So configuration templates are another thing that you want to look at. If you can one-touch provision and deploy equipment, that's great. And a lot of tools are going to offer that to you, whether it's, Palo Alto has their own cloud thing, and Cisco has their own cloud zero-touch provisioning. But for a lot of things that are going to require customization, especially in the bigger enterprise where you're going to have multiple sites and compliance requirements, you're going to want pre-approved secure baseline. And for things like switches, going through a change board for every switch is not going to happen. It's not fast, it's not efficient, it's detrimental to the goal of building cyber resilience. So having one big configuration template that you can store somewhere like SharePoint, or somewhere that is easily accessible and modifiable, right? If you put it in a wiki, you can copy paste it out of a wiki, put it in a notepad document, and edit it, right? So you're gonna be looking at IP configuration, host names, VLANs. In this configuration, have everything approved for your enterprise. And if there's no VoIP phones in this building, just take out the voice VLAN. It's still gonna be on the approved baseline, it's not gonna deviate from that baseline. But you don't have to go through a whole new change control to get it onto the network. There are a lot of tools you can use for that. Things like Ansible will allow you to build a form, fill the form, it'll spit out a configuration. It's a little more complex than that, obviously. It takes some setup to do. And then monitor your configurations. So if you have things like Cisco Prime Infrastructure, Aruba NetEdit, SolarWinds Orion will do it, where you can, with SNMP, pull your configuration off of your equipment and compare it to a baseline. And if it deviates from that baseline, throw some flags so you can find out where it was modified, what deviates, if it's a security risk, or if you just need to improve it. Let's see. Some other things to keep in mind with this would be if you have something like, we use an ISP for example, if a VLAN goes down and if a VLAN is configured and there's nothing on it, the VLAN is down. So that's going to raise red flags for a knock if you're an ISP. You're going to see a VLAN down, it turns out there's nothing on the other end because it's misconfigured. So having a way to control configuration drift is going to be, for a small environment, it may not be that big. But for a larger environment, it can scale out into problems very quickly where you're having engineers fly across the country or drive 2 hours to a site to go find nothing. And that's where it kind of comes to process and procedure provisioning as well. So when you think of a process and a procedure, they're two independent things of each other, right? So your process is your whole task. It's what you're there to do, it's the box you need to check. Your procedures are the steps you're going to take to accomplish that task. So if your goal is for every help desk technician to do the same thing, that means every ticket is going to have an SOP associated with it. And we talked about structured documentation, making it simple to follow. That's going to be requiring a field in your ticket for an SOP you follow. If there's no SOP, somebody can write one and then follow it. If we're making a change that requires an action that no SOP has been written for, write an SOP and approve it at the same time that you approve the change. That way, everyone can reference it in the future. It's always going to be done the same. And it's no different than writing out an implementation plan if you're going to a control board. But now you can use it in the future. So in this example, we're using process to upgrade Windows 11. So you're going to go through your process, which it says procedure, that's wrong. But your process is upgrading Windows 11. You're going to follow a series of procedures to execute that action. So in your ticket, you might have to list 3 or 4 or 5 SOPs that you followed to push this out. But when you go back to search for what ticket most recently used this SOP, or what SOP do we need to create to fulfill a ticket, things like that, it can all come together when you look at it from the high level. You know that every Windows update is going to be done the same way, you know that your process works. And again, importantly, you have a contact to go to when eventually Microsoft changes something.
No, never. They never.
So again, SOPs, clear, concise steps, have visuals, have flowcharts, have screenshots. Make it so that your tier 1 can go and perform server backups or whatever they need to do based off just following these. And run through drills. So when you write an SOP, go follow it, make sure that you can actually complete that task by following the exact documentation you wrote with no background knowledge. That's going to show that they're effective, they're repeatable, and again, when something changes, you know that they're following those steps so you know where you need to pick up to solve a problem. Let's see. And again, to minimize error and for compliance they're required. There's no getting around it. You need to have some sort of coherent documentation or you just don't get anywhere. So one drill that we run is every quarter we pick an SOP, or excuse me, not every quarter, every month we pick an SOP, and we just try to follow it and see if it works. And we assign that to like an intern or tier 1 or whatever, and just say, hey, go try to do this thing. And if they come back, good. If not, you got to reach out to the contact on the SOP and fix it. But they really are, for anything bigger than a 2-man shop, they become very important. Network diagrams and interface descriptions. Again, this is going to be important in your larger environments, a lot more so than your maybe 2-people shops, but they're still important when you're remote, especially trying to solve things. So have a visual map. Those are, Visio. There's a free one called draw.io, which isn't quite as nice, but you can still use it to make, visible network diagrams where you can see how data flows across your infrastructure. Use switch interfaces. They have a description feature, and nobody uses them for some reason. But you can set descriptions on switch
It's not
interfaces.
SOP.
So have a best practice that we struggle to follow, and when I say we, I mean both my organization and in general, is updating interface descriptions, right? So where does port 1124 go? Nobody knows, but if you set a description, you need to have a naming convention, right? So that's another SOP of what's your naming convention. When you deploy the switch out, you're gonna have a switch host name, but then what does it plug into? If it's plugged into a firewall, you gotta have a description that says it plugs into a firewall, or whatever that firewall's host name is, or whatever naming convention you're gonna use. But having some sort of documentation that's structured, it always follows that same naming convention. When you pull it into some sort of auto discovery tool, there's a screenshot here of SolarWinds, I think it's called ADS or something, auto discovery service. It'll pull a topology for you. It'll pull this map for you, but it doesn't show you where the physical cable goes. You can figure out, how the data kind of flows, but I don't know what's an access port. I don't know what's a printer. I don't know what the fire alarm system uses. If I see a port go down, I don't know if it's the fire alarm isn't going to go off, or if Joe can't use the printer. So having some sort of coherent interface description that makes sense is going to solve a lot of frustration in the future with your technicians. And again, it's naming conventions, it's having a procedure to update this every time you deploy equipment, or you deploy a patch panel, or you switch a port, whatever. You don't maybe need to go as far as like VLANs, right? If a VLAN's on the switch on our baseline, we know that the VLAN's there, it's always gonna be there. But having an accurate diagram is gonna cut diagnostic time and resolution time, which saves money, solves problems. And again, with the whole idea of having structured documentation, you're gonna know based on these, host names or IP addresses or whatever you're using, it all comes back to your ticketing system. So you know where your ticket is, you can search your host name, you get every ticket. Maybe it's not integrated, right? But you're gonna get every ticket because you know the host name. Or if you follow a naming convention, enter the first half of the naming convention in an asterisk and you get all your switches. You're not gonna have to worry about, well, this is a core switch, so it follows a different naming convention than our AG switches or our access switches or anything else. And documenting things in dropdowns seems to be I don't know if our free version does it, but we use ServiceNow and we put dropdowns for everything. So if you're doing network equipment, you have a dropdown and you have to select either it's network, it's server, it's endpoint, it's something. And requiring those fields and making it simple takes out a lot of the variable of maybe a technician put computer instead of endpoint, or maybe they put docking station instead of something else. So it takes away a lot of variables and it makes that structure much easier to follow. So network diagrams are just a small piece of that, but having a naming convention and a convention that goes into your network diagrams is very important. Hardware and server documentation there's not a whole lot to hit on. Servers check your serial numbers, your warranties, where they're physically at, who they're issued to. Servers are a little more important because they impact a lot of people. So your OS, your software, your backups, those are kind of run-of-the-mill things, but one thing that a lot of organizations miss is the real impact of the server. If a server experiences downtime, what actually happens? Is it a backup server where there's no day-to-day impact, it doesn't really matter? Or is this the VoIP router? Or is this the security cameras or the log collection server, what actually happens when the server goes down? How can we correlate the help desk tickets that are coming in to the automated alerts coming from, Avaya or from VMware or wherever the server lives? How can we correlate those into a way to make sense of it? Right, you can have a technician sit there and look and talk to everybody, but it doesn't form a picture unless you've had those conversations. You're on the phone, on Teams, you're in that email chain. If you're not in that email chain, you have no way to know. And documentation can solve that problem, especially if it's structured in a way that brings it together. I don't know, does anyone have any tools that you can use for stuff like that? Like I say, we use ServiceNow for a lot of that. It's got a lot of custom stuff in it.
Snipe IT is an asset inventory system where you can set expiration dates and it will populate if it's expired or not.
What is it, Swipe IT?
Snipe IT?
I haven't looked at it.
Yeah, it's a
Asset
pretty good-
management is asset management, I'm sure it's good at it.
Yeah.
Does it do software management? Could you, like,
I'm not
software
sure. I
licenses
haven't
and
used
stuff?
it over like 4 or 5 years, but I'm sure. Yeah, I think it does.
Because, we're talking about server documentation, servers are licensed a lot of the time, or servers have certificates that will expire at some point. So if you can manage your software licenses or your certificate management in a way that correlates or in a way that integrates, that would, I think, be ideal. I haven't found a way to do that really short of, literally setting an expiration date on a calendar. So that might be something we need to look into. WAN, wireless, and network shares. WAN, we see, where does your circuit come in? Where does that building, have the fiber coming? Is it in a room I have access to? Things like that. Wireless, your web locations, your MAC addresses, broadcast networks. Physically where it's at seems to be an important one. I think most people, if you went and asked them where all their access points are, they have no idea. So if you can bring it into your naming convention, I think that'd be a great way to do it. But if not, I don't think tucking your access points into the drum ceiling is really an acceptable option. And a lot of people seem to do it anyway. And then network shares, it's permissions, it's your mapping, it's your use case. Is this the accounting share? Is this the HR share? And it's nice to have, so you can map, assist customers, but it's also there to prevent data breaches. We've seen that plenty of times with, there was a hotel chain that had a big multi-million-dollar issue with some network share permissions. And then phone ticketing and change management. Again, phones, that's your call routing, extensions, configurations. Call routing, any dependencies, if you've got it in your data center, it's not a big deal. But if you've got your call router downstream of like 3 access switches, and it goes down, or a switch upstream of it goes down, you may never know that the phones don't work in, the rest of your organization. As far as change management goes, again, you can approve SOPs at the same time that you review changes. If you're an organization big enough to do change management, which should be like anyone above 5 employees, it should be simple enough to write an SOP and follow said SOP, and just approve it when you approve your change. That way, as you grow, you have the procedure in place, it's already there, it's approved, you know exactly what steps you're following, and if something goes wrong, it makes it much easier to back up and, come out a different way. And yeah, auditable changes again, if you're compliance. For most people, you'll probably never look at it. If you're compliance, you just need to have it. But anyway, that's all I got. Our key takeaways, again, build your structured documentation, try to integrate it. If you can't integrate it, make it in non-integrated systems, integrate with itself. So naming conventions, IP configuration conventions, make subnets that make sense, right? Don't be using /16s in your doctor's office of 24 people. So, real world impact in bigger organizations is document driven. If you're an organization with 10,000 people, you're gonna have a lot of problems when something breaks and nobody knows where it's at. That's like people lose their job level of issues. And our action item that I came up with here, we just started Q3, we ended Q3. So, go review your docs for Q4. And that's all I got.
Just wanted to add one really important thing that I've learned from my current job in working with access points that are shoved in closets and stuff. That I found really useful was getting engineering blueprints of buildings or floor plans submitted to the fire department and using a network monitoring tool to map where those exact locations are, and it helps a lot when you're looking at stuff like that.
Where are you inputting that data to?
So we use a utility called What's Up Gold, and so we just create a custom layout, and we just upload the engineering blueprint to the background, and we just basically slide around wireless access points, switches, and then it gives the configuration info, just basic information and stuff like that. It's been super helpful because there's like, I work with a ginormous facility, and they're always asking me to go figure out what went wrong, and there's like 6 billion access points and 6 billion switches.
So how did they keep track of that?
So basically just the network engineers just update it, so just where they place the access point and just move it around.
So what makes them update that?
Just installation of the wireless access point.
So is there something, maybe an SOP or something that they follow that dictates that they should document that
Unfortunately
specific
not.
information somewhere?
No, but it's just generic like host name information. So
Okay, so it's not storing like IP configuration.
no, it's just more.
So what are you using to monitor your access points then? Are you using some sort of Cisco Prime infrastructure or something like that to...
No, you just intertwine it and just make them communicate to the What's Up Gold server.
But I mean, how do you manage those APs? Do you just have to literally log into the AP itself every time you want to make a change?
I'm not a network engineer, but I'm assuming Cisco software is used to manage that through like a LAN controller.
If you're using Meraki or Unify, you can actually upload your site plans to those and place your access points on a physical map.
Yeah, I've seen that was a feature in ITGlue too.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of options have that. I mean, you can do site maps in, like say Meraki has it, which is going away, but I'm sure it'll be back on the whatever Cisco's new SD-WAN cloud.
Oh, we're taking that away?
Yeah, it's in the sale at the end of the year.
So I have kind of I have a few questions, but I have a Jason question. What do you think of using UML for documentation? So UML diagrams.
I mean, as long as you can make it coherent within your organization.
So,
But it's not accessible.
UML is not accessible.
I wouldn't say so.
You need to have.
I would think it should be a web page that you can, send a SharePoint link to, or something. A lot of ticketing systems, like ServiceNow, has its own knowledge-based thing that you can use. That you can literally, it's a predefined field, right? So all your SOPs go into there, and this is all paid functionality. So we don't use it very extensively. We use SharePoint, but you can upload all of your SOPs as a big repository, and in your tickets you make a required field where you have to type in your SOP number, and you can type in 10 or 5 or whatever, but it autofills. You can see the SOP in the same window as you go through the ticket. And I mean, ServiceNow is expensive, and it's kind of a reach for a lot of people, but
Yeah.
there's no reason that you couldn't do that with any other ticketing system. There's tons of one that came up that integrated with ITGlue was Autotask. I guess it's been around since like the 90s, and it's just integrated with everything now. There's tons of ticketing systems that have that functionality. So making it easily accessible to the end user, where I can go to the client portal and see the SOP, as I submit my ticket, I think would be the optimal way to do it.
So for diagramming, is there anything that you recommend or anything that you prefer for visual diagrams?
We use Visio.
Visio?
Visio or Draw.io.
Draw.io is it's free. It's got its own metadata logging too, so you can kind of integrate it into other things and keep your metadata. It's web-based is the only problem. So when you start getting big diagrams, hundreds or thousands of switches or access points or cables, you can start having some performance problems, but Visio is no different. It just has a desktop application, which makes it nice.
What was the name of that application? I'm sorry.
Draw.io.
Draw.io?
Yeah, it's a website link.
Okay.
But it has desktop.
It also has
Draw.
Draw.io also has, so if you're using Visio, you have to go to Cisco and pull all of the pictures of their switches and then import it into Visio. I think Draw.io
It
comes
has,
with it.
it has a whole bunch of libraries for different brands and,
Yeah, it comes with the
styles of
images
icons.
already built in, I guess, so it seems like a pretty solid option. I haven't used it a whole lot.
I've used it a ton.
It looks like Visio, but better, to be honest, but
Yeah, I hate
having no
Visio.
desktop application is the reason that we can't use it.
So the way we do it at work, and it kind of makes sense, it's just because of the migration of documentation to another ticketing system, because companies always change ticketing systems, it's getting it approved with upper management and just simply having a file share. One of the problems that I've seen with like knowledge-based articles within like ticketing systems like ServiceNow or PMC Remedy and stuff like that is that those knowledge-based articles are a pain to export just because there could be all kinds of different stuff.
Well, that might be a leadership problem,
Yeah.
because you should not be changing ticketing systems very, very frequently. That's
Yeah.
not a problem that I think most organizations.
But like 5-10 years from now, you have all that documentation.
It only happens when they get the annual bill for the
Yeah,
ticketing system.
exactly.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
But
Point being.
yeah, if you can't build it in a ticketing system, I mean, you could build it in a Word document and copy and paste it into a ticketing system. And
The ticketing system, which is also an RMM system that I use, actually has a lot of these features built in, and that's called a Terra. And you can write documentation, SOPs, all that, and link it to your tickets, categorize your tickets.
I think I've seen their advertisements before.
Yeah, you can even auto-assign tickets based on different technician skills. It's kind of neat. And the RMM aspect is passable. I can remote execute PowerShell script, and that's
Well, that's what
all
most
I
things
need.
are going to be.
Yeah.
So
Automate's really awesome, but getting that approved is a difficult one because that's like $50 a computer a month, I think.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Who reviews the SOPs that you put in your tickets?
well, I guess that would be up to your organization and what your structure is. If you're 5 people, it's probably going to be whoever your most experienced technician is, whoever's kind of running things, so to speak.
But I mean, who does it for you?
Who does it for me?
Or your company, you guys?
We have a change control board
Yeah.
of different stakeholders from every department.
Cool.
It's mostly there for managing system downtime, but we have, when you submit, say, whatever you have to CCCB, say you're a network engineer deploying a new web, right? We talked about that. You're gonna have your implementation plan, which we just write out in Word and attach to a ticket. That'll, again, it's a structured document, so it's gonna be, at the top you have your scope, the exact hardware you're touching, host names, IP addresses, and it's a step-by-step guide that you follow. So, step 1, we're gonna do this. Step 2, we're gonna do this. We go all the way through that, and then at the end you have your backup plan for when things go wrong. And the last step of something like an AP upgrade is always gonna be, go find the network diagram and add the AP to that network diagram. And we're on Aruba, so we're using zero-touch provisioning with Aruba Airwave. So it really is a matter of, provision it out, take the MAC address, put it into Airwave, and plug it in.
It depends on the governance framework that they're using too. So.
Well, it does, but it depends who reviews your SOP, depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Typically, you'll have someone review it, in advance before the board, but if you're deploying an AP, there's not a whole lot to worry about. If you're installing software, then it might go through, like say a governance board, or it may be on an approved list somewhere, a non-approved list. There's, for patching, we have a third-party patch tester that we have to send software to for a week. And they have to come back with a go-ahead before you can even move forward.
What do you use for change management?
What's that?
What do you use for change management?
We're using Avanti Heat as just change management. We don't use it for a ticketing system. We don't use it for anything but change management. It's not great. It's kind of clunky looking, and it fulfills the need. And the reason that we're still using that is kind of like you said, we moved ticketing systems at one point, and it was more convenient to stay with Heat because we're on contract. It will be moved to ServiceNow, but there's not an out-of-the-box way to do it that's free, right? So it requires another license, which means it requires, 20 steps to go through, require a license, have someone implement, have someone write new policy for a new change board. So.
SOPs the whole way down.
Yeah, exactly. It requires a lot of SOPs to do something like that, and that's why we try to avoid doing it.
So like looping back around on that whole question there, is you're talking about keeping current SOPs for everything, right? And you kind of joked about Microsoft in the middle of the presentation there, but I don't know if you've worked with a lot of the intra features or 365 features, but
Yeah.
even Microsoft's own documentation, in like literally 70–80% of the cases is not current with what the actual process is. How do you manage when Microsoft upends something and just totally removes an option from a page in the intra admin window somewhere?
And you make a good point, and that's something that we had that conversation a few weeks ago, is that when you refer to, take care guys, thanks for coming.
Of course.
When you refer an SOP that says we are going to follow steps on this page and you get a link to a Microsoft document, you end up with things that break.
Yeah.
So that's why you can't link to other documentation as part of your SOP unless you're performing it right now. Right? If we're doing a change and we're following guidance from Palo Alto or whatever, if we're doing a change, Palo Alto sends us steps and says these steps will work. That's going to be our implementation plan. We're going to follow these steps. And our backup plan is to, go figure it out another way if it doesn't work. But if this is a long-term plan to do something like intra, creating users is not going to be a thing that's going to change very often.
No, but there are some more obscure things that I do on like a daily basis through intra or 365 that have changed drastically in the last few months.
Yeah.
So
Well,
just
and
keeping
that's why
that-
you can't reference their documentation.
Yeah,
You
but
kinda
keeping
have
your
to
own
have-
SOPs current.
So
just-
if you're doing that on a day-to-day basis, you would probably be the best person to be we said every SOP needs to have a point of contact on it, right?
yeah.
So you would be maybe a subject matter expert in your organization that can keep that up to date. Because if it stops working and you delegate a task out to someone else to do it, or it's a required objective for a different ticket, and you're not the one performing it, you can't reference Microsoft documentation because it's broken. So you need to be able to reference the step that you followed yesterday.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's a tool we tried out, I forget what it's called, I would have to look at it. But it's like automated SOP building, where it takes screenshots of every click that you make and puts it in a document, you can copy them out.
Oh, that's cool.
Build your SOPs. I couldn't tell you what it's called. It did videos.
I see ads of that all the time, but I can't think of it now.
Yeah, you'll see an ad of it at some point, I'm sure.
The funny thing about Microsoft is they'll remove the documentation and implement it into Azure PowerShell without telling you anybody.
Yeah, Azure PowerShell sucks.
Yeah.
But that's where like
I mean,
90% of the things you need to do now